Hey guys, Mike Amori again. I wanted to give you a little bonus video here just to give the parents and the kids a little idea of what professional coaching looks like from a video standpoint, because these days there's so much technology, there's so much on the web that you can use to improve your games. So I'm making this video for you guys now. I use it for my students, but if you go online, you can find so many different sources of information. So if it turns out you like the format and you enjoy watching chess online, give me an email and I'd be happy to recommend some stuff for you. Anyway, you're looking at a position from one of the most famous games ever played. Playing the white pieces was Lewis Paulson, and he's playing against perhaps, I don't know, boy, I don't know where to put this guy, Paul Morphy, who played this game in the 19th century. One of the most famous American players, my good friend Alan Abrams, who taught this recently with me at the Chatsworth School, is an expert on the history of these players. So I'm going to kind of leave that to him. You can run into him someday. He actually has a book coming out fairly soon that will give you a background to some of the history of chess and of these players in particular. But anyway, let me give you the chess side of this as a bonus. In the position, when we presented this game, we were telling the parents and the kids as the game was going on that White had a real problem, and hopefully you can see my mouse cursor here. White had a real problem with the black queen in the middle of his position because this queen on this square prevented this d pawn from moving. And because it couldn't move, it locked in this bishop on c1. And you have to be very careful when you're playing your games if you have pieces that don't work. So, for example, having a bishop locked behind your own pawn can be an issue, because if it can't get out, there's an excellent chance that it's also blocking another one of your pieces from playing. It's like this rook is not allowed to jump. So if this bishop is stuck on c1, then clearly this rook is not going to play, which you guys should all be able to see. Now, the bishop can move on this diagonal, but it's really not clear what it would be doing if you did move it on this diagonal. So if you wanted to take a look at this position just to learn some basics about analyzing, and for the younger kids, analyzing basically means looking at something that's really complicated, like a chess position, and then talking about what you see. So if I asked you guys to compare the rooks, I think everybody would vote for this rook on e6 as being the best, because right now it has this whole open file and it has the ability to swing this way and eventually even attack the king. So this rook is very well placed. The rook in the corner, as you can see here, only takes one move to come to e8, and then it would be very active with his friend over here. So if we compared bishops, I like White's bishop here on f3. It's pointing at this pawn. You'll notice this pawn is attacked twice. Once with the queen from a4, and then once with the bishop from f3. And it's also defended twice. The bishop up here is guarding this pawn as well as the rook. So I like this bishop. I don't know about this guy, right? And I love White's bishops, so Black's bishops rather. The one on b6 is pointing directly at the king. Well, I guess not directly because there's a pawn in the way, but it is pointing in his direction. And you'll also notice that the black bishop here on d7, if and when this rook ever moves, this bishop can also come into the zone or the area of this king. And because the black pieces were so well placed, it allowed Morphy with black to play one of the most famous combinations ever played in chess. Okay, so I'm going to show you that to you in a moment. But getting into it, I'll give you a little bit about what Paulson was thinking as White. He's really upset with this queen, and he'd do anything to get rid of it. So he played a move, rook a2. This was his move in the game, and his idea was to bring the queen to this square to basically trade it off, and then once the queens come off the board, then I could push my d-pawn, get this bishop into the game, and then White would probably have an equal position. The problem was, after rook a2, this piece is kind of shut out from the action. You kind of see that it can't jump over this pawn to defend his king. So Morphy with black, as soon as white put his rook on a2, decided to bring his last piece into the game. And this is a really tricky move because while it doubles the power of the rooks, like even the first graders know 2 rooks are worth 10 points. 5 plus 5. So that's a lot of power coming down this line. And it's so powerful that this rook actually stopped white from playing queen c2. Can you guys see why? So if you were at the parents' night at Chatsworth, you have a hint. If you forgot it, you can pause the video. And if you're watching it on YouTube, just click in the middle of the screen and the video should pause for you. You have a checkmate here as black. Can you find it? Yeah, it's really beautiful. You take a rook with your queen, and it looks like such a terrible move, giving up your queen for a rook. The king has no choice but to take it, but because you have 2 rooks on this line, you just play here rook e1 and the game is over. Amazing move. So as soon as black doubled his rooks, Paulsen with white saw that trap, and he decided to just offer the queen trade from up here, which looks like a much better option. So if you take that queen, he'll take back with the rook and eventually move his pawn, free his bishop, and then play chess. Sounds good, except for one problem. By moving the queen up here on a6, every one of white's pieces on this side of the board, so let's talk specifically about the bishop on c1, the rook here on a2, and Big Mama up here on a6. They can't get over to this side of the board if this king gets attacked. And I think when Paulsen played the move, he felt safe because it's like, well, nothing can really attack the king. I have 3 beautiful pawns protecting him from the front. The bishop stands guard of all the light squares. I have a rook down here. Everything looks pretty good to me, except for one problem. Morphy calculated a beautiful sacrifice in this position and actually took the bishop with his queen, which on the surface seems like a really bizarre move. Well, if you don't take the queen, then you're giving the best player in the world at that time an extra piece. Those of you who are hockey fans, think about playing on a power play for the whole game. You'll have an extra skater, but not for 2 or 3 minutes, but for the whole game. You can't give a player this good an extra piece, so white was like, okay, I'll take your queen. That looks like a bad trade, but can you see why he did it? He has this beautiful rook check, and when he plays this check, there's really no good way to cover up that that file. You're checked on that line. You only have one move. You have to move your king into the corner. And then Morphy, when he got this pawn to capture on this square, do you see how it opened up all these light squares? That allowed the bishop to swoop in on h3, and that's a real problem. If you play some random move, this bishop is going to come in here, check the king, and when you move your king, it's going to take this pawn, and it's going to be checkmate. Let me show you what that looks like. Let's say I play some random move like I move my rook down to this square. Well, now I check your king. You can't take it because of the rook, so you have to go underneath, and then I just take here, and oh man, that's checkmate. So that was a real problem. So after bishop h3, Paulsen slid his rook out of the way to give his king a move, and Morphy did this little seesaw with his bishop. Watch this. Gives a check, only move for the king, took a pawn, only move with the king, recheck the king, and again, only move, and then played bishop h3, forcing the king into the corner. And when the king goes into the corner, you'll realize he made that little maneuver or that little dance with the bishop to get rid of this pawn and to open up this line again. He takes the pawn on f2 with his bishop, and after that move, now bishop g2 is actually checkmate because there's no way to cover or get out on this square. The only way to do it would be to guard this square. Well, you can't bring your rook here because that rook will just take you and it will be checkmate. So the only way he could do it was to bring his queen down to f1, give the queen back, and in this position, it kind of looks like things have evened out a little bit. Each player has 2 rooks and a dark squared bishop, although black does have a couple of extra pawns. But from this position, black didn't run away. He actually brought his rook in to protect his bishop, and this rook here is really strong now. And you see what it does also? Remember when white was desperately trying to move this pawn so he could get this bishop out? Poor guy never got into the game. Well, you can't really move this pawn now, because then you'll lose the rook on a2. It's called a pin. So this bishop right now, or this pawn rather, is pinned. And by the way, that little whistling you hear, it's not a tea kettle. Whenever I try to make an illegal move on the computer, it kind of makes that noise. So I don't want you to think you're hearing things. So anyway, white dropped his rook to the bottom so that he could move this pawn. Very sneaky move by black, putting a lot of pressure on this pawn on h2. Finally, the d-pawn moves, trying to get this lazy bishop out, and Morphy offers him the bishop, and believe it or not, in this position, white resigned. You might say, why is that? Well, if you take the bishop, it's checkmate in 2 moves. Why don't you pause your video again, see if you can find it. Okay, my friends, hope you found this move. Check. See how the rooks guard each other? I think that's your only move. And have a nice day. Game over. Checkmate. Beautiful game. Paul Morphy playing the black pieces. Anyway, my friends, if you are watching this, you probably got the video for the tournaments. I hope you sign up. Maybe you can play a combination like this yourself. All the best. Mike Amori.